Joining me for more on China's economic performance is Suisheng Zhao. He is a professor and executive director at the Center for China-US Cooperation at the Josef Korbel School of International Studies at the University of Denver. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure to be here.
So, China is setting a growth target of 6% this year. Many watchers, including the IMF, predicting something more in the ballpark of 8%. What's your forecast?
I think, in fact, a lot of people have predicted that China will not hold GDP growth target for this conference because there were so many uncertainties. So the 6% growth rate is, I think, is a very conservative because China's economic growth since China controlled the pandemic has been very strong. As you said, IMF and the international expectations are about 8%. So here they say 6 and above. I think leaves a lot of room for those uncertainties and also for them to accomplish more than they planned. That would be a very big surprise to people and also for the legitimacy of the government. When we talk about those uncertainties, I think they are both domestic uncertainties and external uncertainties the Chinese government has to take into consideration. They have planned for a lot of investments in social security, education, housing, and some other new projects, which was expect to be spent to spend a lot of money. But because I'm working on the foreign policy front, I know how the international environment has been deteriorated for China's economic growth and also for China's overall development. The pandemic has not been controlled outside China, and the economic growth in other countries, including the U.S. and the European countries, are also uncertain. China's economic growth cannot take place without the global economic growth takes place. So there are so many uncertainties. I think the Chinese government set 6% target is very realistic and also shows the Chinese government is a very, try to make sure it's a very in a stable and a very good position if anything happens.
Right. Professor, I'm going to jump in and quickly ask you, because this is the first time the 5-year plan has an entire section devoted to technology. How will this be viewed by the outside world? Because as we know, technology is a big issue now in international relations for China.
China has faced a very, very serious international environment for the technology development. In fact, the U.S.-China trade war and the attempt by the Trump administration to decouple technology was a wake-up call for the Chinese government to understand. China still relied to a great extent on the foreign firms, especially the U.S. And the European firms, for their technology innovation. So China in the past has not invested enough on those basic indigenous and technological development, science development. They spend a lot of money on the technology, but not on the basic science. Right. So they have to invest hugely now if they want to catch up and also reduce their dependence on the U.S. and the foreign technologies. So I think this is a very right direction for them to go.
Right. And Professor, you talk about investment. There's also a longer-term 15-year plan. And President Xi Jinping has a vision to double China's gross domestic product by then. How do you see the country achieving that?
I think this is China's science technology investments has been number 2 in the whole world, just next to the United States. So those are long-term science technology development programs, including some other programs such as setting technology standard. All those kind of long-term development has been very typical now for China's way to catch up because China has a very strong tradition for industrial policy. In fact, Made in China 2025 was a good example, although they are no longer talking about Made in China 2025. But this spirit of government-guided technology investments and the development has continued. I think they has been intensified in the so-called dual circulation. They have tried to rely upon the Chinese technology, Chinese market, Chinese products for their long-term development.
All right, then. Professor Suisheng, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and insight as always.